how can getting kicked in the face repeatedly be one of the best things ever to happen to you? That is one of the themes today on the Athlete Effect podcast with Shelby Williams-González, CEO of InnerCity Arts and a nationally ranked Taekwondo athlete during her days at Cal Berkeley. Bonnie Bernstein welcoming you back in, and I want you to keep in mind as you're watching or listening to Shelby today that she is 5'2" on a good day. So imagine this 11-year-old earning her first degree black belt, her second degree belt by 14, and her freshman year at Cal placing second in sparring at Taekwondo Nationals. And then I want you to imagine Shelby growing up, for the most part, competing against boys and men, opponents who often underestimated her. We'll hear about how that experience has shaped Shelby as a leader and given her the grit to thrive in the nonprofit space. InnerCity Arts provides free arts education for thousands of low-income kids in LA every single year. And as you might imagine, securing funds for programming and resources is a highly competitive endeavor. We'll also have an interesting discussion about Shelby's second athletic pursuit, professional dance, which she's been doing for more than 20 years. Are dancers athletes or artists? We shall discuss. First, though, want to take a moment to give you your flowers. If you are with us today, you're looking for insight about how to harness your inner athlete to kick butt in your career, or maybe you're a parent or a coach with a female athlete in your lives, welcome. Thank you for choosing us. Please take a second to subscribe and rate and review the podcast, and maybe even share it with one of the other leaders in your life. Okay, time to go dancing with Shelby Williams-González. What about your sports experience makes you a good leader?
Everything. I am who I am because of my sports background. So my energy level, my passion, my drive, my compassion for others all comes from being in environments where I was pushing myself, but I was supported by others. That's the athletes, right? That's athletes, that's teamwork. And so that is exactly what I model for my staff. It's not just that I turn on my athlete side. It's just who I am at all times. It's always on. I don't know how to turn it off.
Here's what I love about having you on this show. Our goal is to become the ultimate, if you see it, you can be it database for women playing sports from an industry standpoint. We also want to showcase women playing as many different sports as we can. And if I'm being honest, which I try to be, I don't come across a lot of women who competed in Taekwondo. If you were talking to parents who were trying to figure out what sports to experiment with their daughter, why would you recommend Taekwondo?
Well, I would recommend Taekwondo. I think for this standard baseline that people say about all sports, the discipline, right? The drive that it creates in a person. But specifically with martial arts and women, I think there's this empowerment of you compete with all genders, right? When you're training, so at least when I was coming up and there weren't very many women in the sport, I was a 12-year-old black belt sparring with 6-foot, grown men. So it creates a playing field that you just feel like you can walk into the rest of the world and handle it, right? So not only the discipline and the physical side of it, the physical components of it, but just that sense of that strength that you carry with you into any situation.
How did Taekwondo first get on your radar? Because it's not we talk about girls playing basketball and girls playing soccer. What was the origin story there?
So my father, who was a football player all through high school and his college, he went to USC and he played for USC football. And when he graduated from college in 1969, he was like, what am I going to do? He knew he didn't want to pursue professional football. He actually was studying business and marketing and became a filmmaker, but he discovered, if you will, or kind of literally walked into a studio, a Taekwondo studio, and fell in love with the martial arts. Not only the sports side of it, but the philosophy behind it. And he really, I think for him, there was this pivotal moment in 1970 that he was like, and this is also how I'm going to raise my children. So my
Oh,
brother was born in 1974. I'm going to date myself. I'm proud of my age. I was born in 77, and my dad was already 7 years into his martial arts career. And when I turned 5, he was like, you do martial arts. The only like rule that he had was like, you have to complete it. At least stick with it and get your black belt. Go through the process of learning everything of the fundamentals. He didn't say we had to compete. He didn't, it was just like we were hungry for it. Both my brother and I. I think he was even surprised how my brother and I took to it. And it literally became something that we did as a family. My mother was not, she didn't get on the mat, but she was there the whole step of the way, she knows everybody. And the Taekwondo community is still my community. Like I consider those teachers, they're still my teachers. They're my mentors. I talk with them. I check in with them. So it's not just about what we do on the mat, but that was really our community.
did you have a favorite teacher?
I did. So I had a few favorite teachers. So one was this gentleman, Ken Nagiyama. He ran the studio in North Hollywood. He always took to my personality, like, again, being like the only girl often, this is back in the 80s, in a class. And, I would just kind of have big eyes, like, do I want to do this? And then I would jump in. And there were times that he would be like, Shelby, you need to like tone it down, like I would get tough. Like I would have fun with it.
What made you so bold in a room where you were often the only girl?
Well, I had the support of both my father and my brother that it was just a non-negotiable, like, no, you do it. They saw something in me before I did of like, you're really good at sparring, Shelby. Like you have a fighter side in you, and they pushed me like, try it more. And I would get frustrated. Yeah, I got hurt sometimes, but I just wanted to do more. The other reason I took to it, and I think I only recognize this now as I'm older, is that it was something very unique to me. So when I walked into a room, it was like, oh yeah, that's the girl that does martial arts, right? So it was like something special that was mine. And I think that whatever it is such an important lesson. And I strive, I thought also influences why I do the work that I do now, right? In the nonprofit sector, because I want every child to have that moment of like, that special thing that is in you and that you carry it with you throughout your life.
Was Taekwondo your sole focus as an athlete, or did you play or experiment with other sports?
I played and experimented with many. So I played basketball in middle school. I ran track and field in high school. I really liked sprinting. I really liked hurdles too. And it's kind of funny because I'm short. I'm only 5'2", like on a good day. Like when I stand up straight, I'm 5'2", maybe. So yeah, I was doing other sports. But yeah, Taekwondo was definitely the constant, and it was where I was passionate. And it also was my first job. So by 16, I would leave my school. I was going to Immaculate Heart, and I would drive down the street, and I taught Taekwondo at a private elementary school. So I was like, wow.
Really? What was
Yeah.
that like? Because you weren't that much older than the kids you were teaching.
I was not. It was fun. It was really fun. But I also think I come from, so my mother's side of the family are all educators. So I was very comfortable being in classrooms. And yeah, I just liked, and my father taught us, like, you pay it forward. What you learn, then you teach it on to somebody else. You don't just keep it for yourself.
I don't want to overlook something you said earlier, which is you got your first degree black belt when you were 12? 12.
Yeah. Yeah.
How?
Well, I started at 5. We worked out a lot. We trained a lot. And then I got my second degree black belt when I was 15 or 14. I can't remember. And then I was training for my third degree, but that's also a part in my life where I stopped competing and I took a turn and I started dancing more. So I was like, I don't need another degree. I like where I am.
You had incredible success very early on at Cal. You had the opportunity to go to nationals for sparring. You placed second in the country. If you're going to go back and paint a picture of that scene, that day in your life, what do you remember most?
when they announced that I won my match, I think I was so tired that I was kind of out of it, right? And my dad was like, Shelby, you won. And I was like, huh? And he was like, you won. And I looked at my dad and he was like crying tears of joy. And I was just like, oh my God, like my dad's crying. So that was the moment that's the apex.
What about you placing second in nationals as a freshman? Do you think brought that kind of emotion out in your dad?
He recognized how much work we had all done as a family, and we were like sharing in this moment together. You know, my family flew out to New York. It was, oh, look, I'm getting like emotional. That was like freaking so many years ago. Being a freshman in college, learning how to be a new college student, move away from home, and then have to diet on top of that and drop weight, because my natural weight was actually the natural weight slot was taken by a senior. So they're like, you got to drop 12 pounds. And I didn't have 12 pounds to drop. So my dad saw how much work I was doing. And like, I was literally in tunnel vision. I couldn't tell you anything else about my freshman year. Like, did I do well academically? Yeah, I mean, I skated by. I did much better the rest of my time. But yeah, it was hard, but it was so rewarding.
I love the way you position the magnitude of you placing second in nationals, not just as an individual achievement, but a family achievement. And why that's so important, Shelby, is that when we look at the statistics, one of the biggest reasons why girls drop out of sports is lack of parental involvement. And my mission is to be able to connect these dots for whatever reason they're not being connected with parents, to help them understand playing sports is like workforce training for girls. Why do you think your parents saw that and invested as much as they did in your athletic experience?
Well, I think I come from a family of like that perfect balance. When you have a mother who is an educator, she was an elementary school teacher. Her parents were also involved in education. And then a father who really leaned on his athletic abilities. Like he's naturally athletic. So it creates the platform for sports and education are one and the same, right? In that it's giving you skills for yourself, but it's also giving you the skills that you want to pass on to someone else.
Stick with us after the break. Shelby tells us why she knew from day one that her sports experience would play a huge role in her career. We'll also talk about Shelby's other athletic pursuit, dance, and her take on whether dancers are athletes or artists. By the time you were starting to think about college, I believe you had the opportunity to train with the Korean national team. Is that right?
That is right.
So tee up that story. Take us back to that time and how that opportunity presented itself.
It was my freshman year, and the team, we took a trip to Colorado to the Olympic Training Center and met the Korean national team, because our coach used to be their coach. And so it was amazing. Like, it was one of those moments where when things click and you're like, oh, wow, yeah, this is bigger than just me. So it was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I was tired and terrified and probably bruised up a little, but it was the best experience I could imagine, because it was also, the national Korean team, they didn't speak English, and I had limited Korean, but we all knew what we were doing. So even that's a beautiful thing, that you don't like the universal language of movement. Often maybe non-athletes or someone looking at a sport thinks that it is a competitive sport. Yeah. When I'm sparring, I wanted to win, but when you're training, it is collaborative. It is about learning and pulling from what you're seeing other people doing, right? How they're executing their kicks or whatever the sport is. I love that collaborative learning. So just observing other folks and watching their rhythms and how they respond and their counters, like, that's how you learn. It was truly like the best teaching lab I could have imagined.
But what makes one good at sparring?
Speed, agility, and the ability to literally think on your feet. So there's a balance of being the aggressor and then being on the defense. A good spar can play to both. I think the best part is when you have the ability to change your opponent's rhythm.
I would imagine that you predominantly competed against men when you were training in club. Was that the same case when you got to college, or were there more women in Taekwondo?
No, so there were more women, and we had we had the women's team and the men's team, and it was really nice. I felt like I learned so much from them, and learning from women who are also my size, because I rarely trained with people who's basically as short as me, right? I was always kicking up. So that also changes the way that you execute your kicks when you're literally kicking at the same level as you.
With that in mind, let's rewind. For the most part, when you were growing up, you step onto the mat and you're facing off against a boy.
Mm-hmm.
What would the reaction be like when you're coming face to face for the first time?
I think I was underestimated. And that's also a lesson that I have learned and used in my favor. And that lesson of pushing through someone else's lowered expectation of you, that's a powerful lesson to take on through all your life.
You're so different than a lot of the women I interview, because I commonly hear that women don't understand how the life skills they learn through sports are going to come into play in their career until they're well into their careers. And then they have this aha moment. And when you and I were doing our prep call, you had this line, and I loved it. You said, sports analogies were how my brother and I were parented.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm going to assume, as you mentioned, a lot of that has to do with your dad playing college ball and starting to do martial arts himself. How did your dad model harnessing those life skills once he really started getting into his business career? How did that show up from your point of view as a kid growing up in that house?
So my father started his own company, and he did like film production for Alcoa, Toyota were some of his clients. My father is an amazing interviewer. That was his main part when he would make these films and videos for his clients. And when he interviewed folks, it was the same rhythm as sparring. So he would talk to you. And I don't mean this, so follow me with me.
I'm here, Bonnie. I'm here for this ride.
It's this idea, like how you pull out information, just like you're doing, right? This interview, like how you set the pace of an interview. To me, I was like, oh, it's like sparring. Like the way you have a conversation, right? You're going to give a little, you're going to take a little. So that's how I'm also a kinesthetic learner. So I see things in movement, but that's what it was. Like, I was like, oh, my dad he's using those sparring skills to pull out information when people are nervous to speak. It's this dance. It's kind of funny that I use dance because now I'm a dancer.
Because now you're a dancer, which provides the great transition. So something through osmosis has rubbed off on you through your dad. So, okay, so let's get to chapter 2 of your athlete life, because I consider dance a sport.
Thank you.
Tell me about the day life changed for you in terms of your athletic focus when you were at Berkeley.
Okay. So I had always danced just for fun, taken classes here and there growing up. And I liked to move. I also liked choreograph. I knew that was something I liked, but I remember the moment. So I was walking on the Berkeley campus, and it was like one of those days where they had clubs out, and there was a dance club. And I was like, what's a dance club? Like, and they're like, oh, well, we have classes, and then I learned that, well, not only we have classes, but we have a whole dance department here. And I was like, what? There's a dance department here? So I signed up. I was like, okay, I'll take one class. And it was a modern dance class in Graham technique based on Martha Graham's technique. Its foundation is ballet, in that sense, the very upright body, but modern dance and that things are a little more off center. But Martha Graham also created a system of warm-ups that you go through before you even like get up on the floor to perform choreography. So I took this class, and I remember the first class, I was like, wow, this is really hard. And I was like, this is why I love it, because I know physically I can do it. It's like learning a new language. So I have to go from, I'm not going to kick the people I'm standing next to. Sorry. But
that wouldn't work out well.
Yeah, it would not, but something clicked, and I didn't even hesitate. I think a week later, I walked over to the martial arts department. I was like, guys, I will continue to train with you, but like, I don't think I want to compete, because I'm going to go focus on dance now. And I think I'm going to major in it. And they were like, what? And I was like, yeah, I think I'm a dancer now. It was that moment, like, of just seeing a classroom full of bodies also moving in unison, in a different way, which is, you see that in martial arts as well. So I understood all the physicality of it. It was, like I said, just learning a new language.
How would you compare the level of physicality, the way you would train and compete in Taekwondo versus the way you would train and perform in dance?
I feel like in those early years, I got injured more in dance than I did ever in Taekwondo, because the like rolling through your feet, and the jumps and leaps and landing specifically. Like, I had weak ankles, so like my ankles would crack. I dislocated toes more in dance performances. I never dislocated anything in martial arts. Dance was harder on the smaller muscles. Literally the joints, the ankles, the even like the wrists, your lower back, like the tiny little spots, the knees. I always felt that in dance.
Straight ahead on The Athlete Effect, Shelby talks about how getting kicked in the face as an athlete has empowered her as a CEO. And if you played sports, you've probably experienced what it's like to be in the zone. Shelby tells a fascinating story about what it feels like as a dancer, and it's called Catching the Ghost. When we were doing our prep interview, you had this amazing phrase called catching the ghost, because we were talking about being in the zone. Like, for me, when I was doing gymnastics and like I'm completely locked in on my beam routine on this 4-inch wide apparatus, or when a basketball player is just like shooting the lights out from a 3, we're in that zone. How do you liken that to the world of dance?
So catching the ghost in dance, it is that moment of, it's almost out of body experience. The last 20 years, I've really focused on Afro-Brazilian dance. So I've stepped away from the more modern dance. And in Afro-Brazilian dance, there's contemporary Afro-Brazilian dance, which is much like contemporary dance here. And then there's something where you dance for the orishas, which is much more traditional dance and would liken to more of the West African influence on Brazilian culture, and that's that dance form. And when you're dancing for something, the feeling is out of body, in that, like, I literally feel like I can see myself moving. And it's just about, like, literally it feels like energy is just flowing through you. It's not about the step or the move. It's that energy that is pulsating through your body that is so beautiful, and nothing else matters in that moment and time. It is full presence. And I think that's what we're all trying to chase in our lives, no matter what, of that, like, 100% presence in that singular moment.
As somebody who has danced professionally, which you have for more than 20 years, when people say dance isn't a sport, how do you counter that?
Simply by saying, no, it is. It's physical. It is both a team sport and an individual sport. When you're dancing in a company, you have to lean on your members. You have to create something together. You have to be literally in rhythm. And it's physical. It's physicality. Yes, it's performative. We know, I think the difference is in that, as when I'm in dancer mode, I know the audience is there and I am playing to that. But when I'm doing Taekwondo or I'm boxing, I'm not playing to an audience, right? That is about me and the other athlete. So that is the only difference.
Girls and women don't always subscribe to playing what we call the traditional sports. And when you think of the element of dance, competitive cheer, as to your point, sometimes an individual sport, but also as a team sport, it really offers a lot of the same sort of life skills as, soccer, basketball, tennis, volleyball, pick your sport. But the one thing I hear that I think is kind of interesting is that dancers who some don't consider themselves athletes because they consider themselves artists. And I'm curious when you look through those two unique lenses if you lean one way or the other.
I don't. For me personally, I think I'm both. I identify as both. And I think they're interchangeable. My artistry gets better when my athleticism is also piqued and interested. If pushed, more dancers would say that they're both. Like when Kobe Bryant was playing basketball, that's artistry, right? When you see any athlete at their top form, Sha'Carri Richardson, when she runs, that's artistry. Like, it's a beautiful thing to see someone exude that much power in such a short amount of time. So I say we start pushing back against that differentiation of artist versus athlete. Why can't we all be both?
100%. I love how you have taken this passion for dance and you still dance today, but you've created a career out of it. Initially as a dancer, and then you sort of switched to administration, and now you're in a senior leadership position as president and CEO of InnerCity Arts. But I want to step back to the 13 years that you spent at a wonderful nonprofit called the Heart Project. So I'm curious, you mentioned your mom and your grandmother, so you come from a family of teachers. This seems to come very naturally and instinctively to you. Did you ever think, I someday might want to be a CEO of a nonprofit versus, being that third generation teacher?
I did not see CEO, president of a nonprofit in my future. That just sort of unfolded. I did know that I wanted to be in education in some way, but I also knew that I don't want to be a classroom teacher. I don't think. I still want to dance. So it was finding that balance. And that's how I got into nonprofit work, because I was a teaching artist that but like I would have to pop around from school to school teaching dance. And I loved that. And here I am, yes, as a CEO of an organization. Every day I'm so thankful that I get to be in this world where, yes, I'm not dancing here at InnerCity Arts, but I'm surrounded by artists. I'm making space for young people to come here and experience the arts. I'm making space in our theater for people to come and experience live performances or see their own children on stage. Like it's a blessing.
What I think is really similar about artists and athletes is that it's only a fraction of us are going to be able to make a living out of this because there are only so few opportunities. Through your lens, how have you been able to create a career out of the arts? And how can you take your experience and advise athletes about how they can put that athlete effect to work in a career, even though they may not actually be still competing?
Yeah, it's about using that energy, right? And then how do you transfer it to something else? Because dancer and being an artist is something that you carry with you no matter what outlet it is, if you were. Is doing a spreadsheet or writing a grant about arts education as fun as dancing? Not always, but I know that what I get at the end of that grant, if I get it and then somebody else is going to dance, then I'm going to put my full self into it. And I know that's a weird way to answer that question, but it's about just redirecting that energy and accepting that we all wear multiple hats and we all, like, you just kind of vacillate between all these worlds that you are. And that is okay. Like, that is also a form of success.
You worked your way up to become the executive director for the Heart Project. Then InnerCity Arts came along, and this was your first opportunity to be a president and CEO. What about your inner athlete were you harnessing in that interview, having the confidence in yourself to break new personal ground for you? And now that you've been in it for a while, what part of that athlete experience comes to light for you every day in your leadership position?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you said it right there. Like in that interview process, I was tapping into that athlete side of me of like, you're going to give your all. I don't know what's on the other side, but that just in itself, that comes from years of being an athlete. I'm going to tell you what I'm passionate about. I'm going to tell you my thoughts. I'm just going to be all me.
You had mentioned something during our prep meeting about like getting kicked in the face when you were younger. Can you talk a little bit more and reflect back on that experience and how that plays a role in your mindset now?
Yeah. I mean, I often joke there's no interview that scares me, in terms of like fight or flight. I literally to ask myself, well, are you in physical harm, like danger? Is anyone going to, like, if you go into an interview, is someone going to attack you? Like, nope. And if they do, could you take them? Yep. So, all right, well, let's move on to something else. Like, that's literally something I just say in my head. I've literally been kicked in the face. And so there's nothing that I am afraid of. Like, I can move past that. I remember training actually when I was getting ready to join the Berkeley team. I actually trained with a group of competitive men in the Valley. There was one night I sparred this gentleman and he kept doing this cheat move where he was stepping on my foot and I could he was like a 200-pound man and I couldn't get my foot under and then he would just punch me. And so I remember that moment because it was like I got really frustrated. And I remember my dad talking me in the car like, okay, it was wrong. You were frustrated and you got upset. But the more that you got upset, you couldn't control and think about how to react. So think of when you are frustrated. It's okay to get frustrated, but don't let that be the driving emotion for your next move.
I was taking a look at your introductory video when you first came on board at InnerCity Arts. But one of the things you said was you encouraged your employees to try something new, to try a new art form, to get out of your comfort zone, to take that risk, to push yourself beyond your boundaries. And as I'm listening to that, I'm like, that's an athlete.
That's the idea, right? The lesson of always pushing yourself, challenging yourself, and it's okay what the outcome is. I know this is cliche, but it's so much about that journey of getting somewhere that is so important. If you're not afraid to fail, you're going to give 100%.
Is there a difference between for-profit and nonprofit leadership?
Nonprofit is about the service itself. It's not about the bottom line or a profit share. I don't have to think about stakeholders. My accountability is to the students that we serve.
What would be the one analogy, the one anecdote that you would share that encapsulates you as an athlete pushing yourself beyond your boundaries?
Mentally, it's like around puberty. And there was that moment of like, oh, wait, the girls are doing this and the guys are doing this, but I want to do more martial arts. I might not look like the other girls and like, I was a little bit of a tomboy and everything, but I was okay with that because it was like I was following my passion. So making the conscious choice about how I was going to be or who I was going to be.
We're going to take a quick pause, but stick around if you've ever thought about quitting your sport or you are a parent whose child has contemplated stepping away. Shelby has some terrific perspective on this you'll want to hear, and the epiphany she had during the pandemic about her mental health that has changed everything about her workout mindset. Back in 2002, when No Child Left Behind was implemented, and there was this real push to make sure that our kids were accelerating in areas like reading and math, and there was accountability attached to that. If the test scores weren't going up, then there was a possibility that public schools would receive less federal funds. And the byproduct of that was that a lot of the budget that was traditionally designated for music and the arts and the sports got shifted. From your perspective, of somebody who's been in arts education for as long as you have, why is it important for a young person to not only have access to the best of the best in the classroom, but to also have access to arts and sports?
It is not binary. There is not one way that every child in our country learns, or on this planet, right? We need to be able to create a learning environment that leans and feeds multiple modalities, multiple ways of learning. When No Child Left Behind was created, yes, I think it was great to have a push to, increase our math scores and our literacy scores, but to then let go of music, dance, arts, that was doing a disservice to our students because so many kids learn in that way too. I am an amazing dancer, yes, and I like math. And those two things can coexist and they help one another.
If a girl was on the other side of this camera instead of me, she's an athlete, she's thinking about quitting, what would you say to encourage her to stay?
I would ask, is this a moment of frustration? Because if it's frustration with something, you're going to get through it. I would lean on don't give up, because you're going to learn something when you pass through that moment of whether you want to quit or you're disgusted with it. I think you can always adjust your relationship with your sport, but never leave it behind because it's so who you are. If it brings you joy, it will always bring you joy.
It is so hard for successful women to create this fallacy that is work-life balance. You'd mentioned that boxing has become something you've been passionate about. Where does that fit in your daily routine? So you're tapping your inner athlete as a leader, but you're also still being an athlete, getting that exercise and taking care of your own personal health and wellness.
I get up really early and I go work out. I love that early morning dopamine kick in and then start my day and go into work. And I think that's also that true athlete in me, let me get it in. And it's not so, I never say oh, I want to work out in the morning, so then I'm done and I don't have to work out again. I'm no, I'm so excited to work out because I love my brain wakes up, my body shakes out, all the kinks get out. And then it's okay, I'm ready for the day. And sometimes at the end of the day, I'm oh, I feel great. I should go work out. And I'm oh, wait, I already did. Actually, I probably should go home, but I don't need to sleep that much.
I'd imagine it's really helpful too when you've got the sort of daily schedule that you do from a mental health perspective. As somebody who probably doesn't have a lot of moments in the day that are truly yours, that you have something that's truly yours.
Yeah, it is. It's so rewarding to have 60 minutes of just, again, going back to that singularity moment, right? Because for the next 10 hours, I'm going to be multitasking. But it's also, I'm pushing myself. I don't do it just lightly. No, let's go hard because that's my version of fun. I know it's not everybody's fun, but it's my fun.
What other tools do you have in your mental health toolkit that are really important for you in adult life as a leader?
I think recognizing when you do need to rest, and rest is just as important. And so I'm trying to learn this lesson, Bonnie, of oh, I think you are supposed to take a day or it's okay to be still. I'm having a real hard time with it. Check in with me in 6 months. But yeah, I'm trying to learn that part of it because I want to do this for my entire life. I'm not training for something and then I'm going to be okay, I'm done. Right? No, this is my lifestyle. So I want to be boxing and dancing when I'm 80.
What's making you feel that way, Shelby? Is there something in particular that happened where you just kind of realized, okay, I need to add something to my daily routine to keep my mind right? Because if I don't, the grind is going to get to me.
I realized it actually, unfortunately, in a really hard way. It was in 2020 during the pandemic when we were all isolated, and I wasn't dancing. And like I had done a Zoom dance class here and there, but I didn't really like it. Ahmaud Arbery had just been murdered, and so I actually stopped running because when a Black man was murdered while just running in his neighborhood, that kind of freaked me out. And like, I literally mentally had a meltdown, and I had a meltdown in my driveway. I remember, and just thinking like, I'm not happy. I'm frustrated in my own body. It was really a truly moment, like I lost my connection to myself. And that was a really scary thing. So it was like, oh yeah, I need to stay active.
Who helped you through that time?
Well, one, a therapist. And when your therapist is like, yeah, I don't think you need me. I think you need to just go run. You're like, yeah, you need to stay active, Shelby. So she was like, go, just get out, And I was like, okay. And then we checked in the next week, and she was like, did you do something? And I was like, yeah. She's like, how do you feel? I was like, oh my, I'm starting to feel like myself again.
Really important lesson. Had you done therapy prior to that?
I had not. That was my first time, and it was really helpful. And I stayed with it for about a year and a half. Yeah, just like, and also it was a time, I mean, I'm still in my 40s, but I was in my 40s. I'm getting older. I'm dealing with a adolescent child, and, there's a pandemic. So it was certainly helpful.
That's all the affirmation you needed.
Yeah.
Such a powerful message about the importance of exercising for our mental health. And Shelby's advice to girls, I hope that resonated. It did with me because, it's pretty much inevitable that as an athlete, we're going to get super frustrated at some point in our careers. But just knowing that emotion will pass, if the sport brings you joy, stick with it and understand that working through it will make you stronger as an athlete and as a person. Thank you so much to Shelby for joining us today. You'll find the handles for her socials, the InnerCity Arts website and socials, and the show notes, as well as all of the ways you can get in touch with us at The Athlete Effect. If you enjoyed today's conversation, plenty more where that came from, so please subscribe to our show so you never miss an episode. And if you'd be kind enough to rate and review, it would mean the world to us. As always, thanks to our amazing pod squad, Allison Williams, Carlos Delgado, Jess Levy, and Kimberly Neal. The Athlete Effect is a Walk Swiftly Productions podcast, copyright 2026, all rights reserved. Once an athlete, always an athlete. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again soon.